Hi, I'm Roy Collin, the host of the podcast. You can find everything about me by scanning the QR code there or going to roycollin.com. And you'll find my 6 podcasts, the Podfather, helping people become podcasters, the Awakening, exposing fraud and corruption, but with solutions, the Crypto, all things blockchain technology, meditation podcast, speaking podcast, and the Learn Polish podcast. You can also help the show by actually making a donation, visiting the store, or helping my sponsors. I hope you enjoyed this week's show.
I'm actually going to say welcome to the Speaking and Awakening podcast, because I think what we're going to talk about is going to be relevant to both these podcasts. My guest is the author of America in Therapy, but she's also an author of 2 other books, so we might touch on them. Speaker, blogger, and a physiotherapist, or not physiotherapist, psychotherapist, eh?
Psychotherapist, yeah.
Psychotherapist for over 30 years, but now you're retired. But basically, it's kind of in touch with what you said, American in Therapy. Please welcome Phyllis Leavitt. Did I do it justice?
You did, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me here with you.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I'm in it. Like, there's a lot of things that we can kind of go down. We've kind of discussed it before recording. But what I'd like to touch is let people know a little bit more about yourself and kind of how you got into this. Because my own experience of different people that I see that are doing therapy, something happened to them that they realized they got help, and then they decided, this is great, I can help other people. So I'd like to hear your own story.
That's my story. Yeah, I mean, when I grew up, actually, nobody talked about therapy. I think it was more of a Freudian orientation toward psychology anyway. But when I was in my 30s, I was really at a really hard time in my life, and I was uncovering memories of having been hurt as a child. And at that time, therapy was getting kind of a better name, and many of my friends were starting to explore psychotherapy. So I decided to give it a try. And it really was life-changing for me to understand that what happens to us in our childhood, what the formative experiences are, what the role models and the expectations of us are, what the beliefs that we're surrounded by, really do affect the way we see ourselves and the coping mechanisms we come up with, and the ways that we either thrive or don't thrive as adults when we go out into the world. And I was not thriving. I was a mother of 3 little kids and a very unhappy marriage. And when I went to therapy, it really started to put some of the pieces together for me. And exactly like you said, I decided at that time, my youngest was 2, I think, and I really wanted to go back to school. And I went back to school and got a degree in psychology and had a career in psychology as a psychotherapist ever since. And it was a very rewarding career, because, so many people are suffering the ill effects of things that happened in their childhood, whether it was in their home or in their community, that they don't even know why they're so affected by it. And psychology helps make sense of all of that.
And like, when you go to a psychologist, because I think it's like anything in life, like a business person, they're all different levels, a doctor and everything. And unfortunately, some people go to the wrong ones. Is it just a case of kind of feeling it out, or is there a way of kind of knowing how to find somebody that's actually going to help you? Because unfortunately, and a lot of people know this, a lot of people use it as a business model. They're just kind of get them in and they just get them to regurgitate the same things and talk, and you're grand, then come back next week. And yeah, like I heard a conversation, I had somebody on recently and they were talking about some time, 40 years the person was with them. And then, yeah, and you're like, So like, I know there's a lot of people hurting. So when they decide to make the jump, like, how should they try to navigate this crazy world?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways. And of course, the best judge is just how you feel. Does this person get you? Does it feel like they have light to offer at the end of your tunnel? Not like they're the savior of the world, but that they have something to offer you in terms of your own processing of what's disturbing you or what feels blocked or where you have pain in your, in your life and in your psyche. That the best thing is to just trust your own instincts. If something doesn't feel good or you just don't, like you're uncomfortable, or you feel judged, or you don't feel like the person gets you, don't go back. Or if they say something that, feels injurious, which sometimes happens, don't go back. But I think there are a couple of things. One is, often people go to a therapist who other people that they know have recommended and have felt that the work they did was really significant and helpful. And I think, sort of like when you pick a doctor, sometimes you pick someone that one of your friends has gone to and really liked. So recommendations from other people, obviously some credentials that are important. And do they work in a way that, some therapists have an orientation that's like solution focused, very, very quick in and out. Some people do very deep inner child work. Some people are, specialize in trauma or family systems. So, check out what the person is most expert in, and see if it's a fit for what you're actually asking for.
Yeah. So like with your book, I mean, you're basically saying the amount of people, and like, unfortunately, there's a lot of abuse going on, and it's kind of brushed under the table, and it's like, don't say nothing. And not just sexual, all types of abuse. And
That's right.
but it's even like I've seen it with families, like even if there's somebody that's kind of alcoholic, it's like, say nothing, pretend it's not happening. And if you try to go to help somebody, this kind of happened with outside of my family, but somebody I knew, and it was like they turned on me because I was trying to go on this. It's like the whole family was on board. I mean, I assume you've seen something like that, which was shocking to me, because I'm there to go, I want to help this person because I can see this there. Like, we're talking drinking aftershave kind of level, that, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think what you bring up is a really important point, both on the individual family level and on the macro level. Our largest communities, our large organizations and institutions and government, that there is typically and somewhat unconsciously, and now I think even more consciously, the desire to deny the things that are happening that are hurting people, or minimizing them, and these are all what I point out in my book. My book is called America in Therapy, and really what I'm doing in my book is showing that some of the dynamics that you're talking about, abuse and neglect and addiction, and all the ways that we harm one another, sometimes unintentionally, but certainly we are doing that, and sometimes intentionally. All the ways that we harm each other in our families are also happening at higher levels of organization of people. And organizations are made up of people. So if you have injured people running organizations, they're most likely to reenact some of their injury on the people around them. If they've been overpowered and hurt, and they're angry, and they were a target, often they look for a target, because so often we repeat what we know. Or if I felt silenced and I felt like I had to submit and become passive in order to survive, when I go into a workplace where people are being hurt or mistreated, or there's injustice, my coping mechanism might be to be quiet and be passive, because that's how I learned to take care of myself. And these two configurations are only some of many, but these two configurations of the aftermath of being hurt by other people with no way of escape or no way to get treatment, becoming passive and easily coerced, or becoming aggressive and identifying with the aggressor and taking on those behaviors, those two behaviors fit together like this. Someone who wants to dominate will look for someone they can dominate. And someone who's easily dominated will be easy prey for someone who wants to be in charge and take control of them. And this is happening in our families. You speak from another country than I'm in, but in America, I know that there's, from my practice of many, many, many years with hundreds of clients, that abuse and neglect on all levels, emotional, mental, sexual, physical, religious, economic, abuse on so many levels is widespread. And we have masses of symptomatic people who are showing their symptoms in society, and they're they're really calling for help. Just like our body, if we have, terrible pain or an infection or we can't walk, our body is calling for help and healing. Yet we don't often look at our psychological symptoms the same way. And we, just as you're saying, we minimize, we deny, we repress, we shame, we blame, we punish people who become highly symptomatic or who are calling out for the abuses that they see around them. And these are all dynamics of dysfunctional families. And that's what I'm trying to really elucidate in my book, that it happens on all levels. And if we don't stop it, if we don't see that our mental health collectively is really at risk on a national level in America for sure, and I think around the world for sure, then we're in danger of more and more divisiveness, more and more violence, and more acting out on our most vulnerable populations. That's what I see. Excuse me.
I hear going, and like with the religions, because that's something that I've seen as well. And I mean, it can be a touchy subject, but what's happening is, especially if there's a breakup and there's kids involved, sometimes when the pain is there, somebody kind of they kind of go for a certain religion, whatever. Even like there's the Scientology, and if there's so many of them that are out there, but there's so many of them that are corrupt and brainwashing the people. And then what you have is you've got that family member pushing that on the kids, and then the other person on the other side actually can kind of see it and understand. And it's just creating so much tension. So the child is in the middle and not really knowing what's going on. And I think maybe if you could touch on it, because that's fairly international, massive scale.
Are you talking specifically about religion or just about the trauma that happens to children when there's a divorce and their parents can't agree?
I would say more the religions, because it's something that I've seen like a lot as well, that more the religion side of things, because it's a belief system. And unfortunately, and plus that can change as well, because what I've noticed, because it's something that I've kind of looked down deep, is that they have ways of finding when someone is hurting, and they, let's say, like that they're at a vulnerable stage, and their recruitment process is grabbing them at that, which in turn then they find this is a help for me, but all they're doing really is abusing them, and that unfortunately then leads them to do that to their children, and their children's in a confused state because perhaps the other partner is actually able to see this and go, hey, this isn't right, but it's just kind of a magnet situation.
Can't necessarily stop it, right? So this is what I would say. What I would say is I would take the same lens that I look at a country and look at an organized religion that may be very dogmatic or very rigid or very, proselytizing, and you sort of have to believe a certain way and behave a certain way, or, honor a certain person or whatever it is, that we bring our psychology wherever we go. So if I'm someone who's really unhealed and I've become very passive and submissive, I may be very or easily influenced, or, another example of an outcome from abuse and neglect is that people are not allowed to listen to their intuition. And, when we were talking earlier about how do you choose a therapist, definitely listen to your own intuition. Is this person a good fit for me? Do I feel seen? Do I feel heard? Do I feel honored? Do I feel like my process, is something that this person can hold? When you're in an abusive situation, whether it's a family or a religious organization or a business organization or under the thumb of an abusive government, you can't really safely listen to your own intuition. So if your intuition is telling you to leave, and you can't because there's either social pressure or the pressure from your parents or pressure that you're going to be, go to hell or whatever you're being told, that you may not be able to listen to your own intuition and go to safety, because that's exactly what an abusive organization or system doesn't want. It doesn't want you to think for yourself. It doesn't want you to call out injustice or question authority or question the hierarchy. So what I have found, and I when I was younger, I was in a couple of different spiritual groups. They they weren't exactly religions, but they were spiritual groups that had a practice and had a mindset, and they weren't, horribly deleterious in any way. But what I did see was that people brought their wounds and acted them out on each other there just as much as they did in their own lives. So people who were dominating and wanted to be in control inevitably got themselves into position of power where they could dominate other people. And people who were very timid and shy were easily dominated and felt shame about themselves and felt like they weren't good enough and were all trying to please or trying to do it better. So basically, we act our stuff out wherever we go. And that's why the focus of my book is that it's our mental health that's really at the root of our problems, whether it's in a church or a country or a community, or it can be gender. What we've been taught to believe about ourselves and how we've been taught to behave has everything to do with how we will function in a church or a government or a home, or a community. And so bottom line is what I would say is people who are loved, who are respected, who are treated well, even if there's conflict, that there's a commitment to peaceful conflict resolution without, you know, um, abusing anyone or ostracizing someone because they have a different point of view. People who are brought up relatively in a relatively healthy, loving, caring, respectful, good boundaried home. And again, none of us do that perfectly. We're all human and we make mistakes. Um, don't want to dominate other people that way. They don't want to, ostracize people as sinners or, or torture them or kill them or, harm them. Mentally healthy people do not abuse other individuals. And no matter what your political party is or your race or your gender or your economic class, if you have been loved and cared for and you have been taught to respect other human beings and respect yourself, the tendency is that you won't go out into the world and harm other human beings for any reason. Obviously, if there's overt self-defense, sometimes you have to do that. And sometimes there's a real need to powerfully stand up for yourself and your beliefs and your values. But that's different than attacking other people because you disagree.
Definitely. So I heard you talking about the way people like 2016 were kind of talking about more politics, and politics is a big thing. And because especially with the away thing, because I'm exposing fraud and corruption, I pay attention to a lot of international politics, and it's not just in America, it's widespread. I mean, in Ireland, I give you an example. We had a referendum recently, and there was like about a 20% turnout, and with a 75% that went against the government. The government that has been formed for the last 10 years is both the left and the right and the Green Party. So that's just showing that they've got like less than 10% support from the people. I mean, everything they do, but that's across the board, the UK, Poland, everywhere. It's like, you're just looking at them and you're going, these are not nice people. Everyone is trying to figure it out. And I mean, I've looked at some stuff, and you hear some things, like some things is, have they been compromised in, like they've go to Epstein's Island or something like that, it's recorded, and there's that, and then they therefore have to comply. And there's other things I've seen where, it's from an abusiveness, like demonic families and the whole train going through that, where once they're pregnant, they get rid of the emotional. But the reality is, the way that you've touched it is, you've got injured people that basically we're expecting them to have the same emotions as us, and we're trying to comprehend how can they do this when they're hurting everyone, they're throwing people out the street, the amount of homelessness and everything. And I just like it because I mean that is international as well, at a massive scale.
Absolutely. And for me, and again, there's lots of approaches to the inhumanity that man inflicts on man. There's lots of approaches that all need to be factored in. I feel that the psychological lens is so missing on our institutions that it's a dangerous missing piece. So I'm not speaking for every single approach to healing human relations, but I think psychology does have a missing piece. And it's exactly what you said, that hurt people will hurt people. There's no baby that's, and unless a baby is born with some really messed up biochemistry or some other anomaly in their brain, babies are not born murderers. They're not born hating. In fact, we're wired for love and connection. Love and connection are the best food for human beings. And when people are fed love and connection, and all the other things we were talking about, good boundaries and peaceful conflict resolution and having their basic needs met and all of those things, they don't become violent and they don't become murderous and they don't become hateful. And so we have to look at the food we're feeding human beings. And if people are being fed hate and they're growing up, being conditioned or even brainwashed to think that a certain group of people is inferior and needs to be wiped out, or that they have a right to take the resources from defenseless people in some other part of the world. If that's what they're being fed, then that's what they're going to probably manifest unless they have an influence from some other source that's more humane. And I think we have more and more people that are being brainwashed to think that they have a right to dominate and kill and steal and rape and pillage, that they're superior or that they're just entitled because they already have power. I think people can become easily addicted to power and control. There are many addictions that are, all part of this whole dominating and submitting cycle. Addictions to power, addictions to wealth, addictions to sex, control, addictions to righteousness, is a big one that you're, relating to religion, some religion. So we really have to look at the family environment, not just the individual person, but, and this goes along with what you were saying about 2016, I see sort of as a turning point in America, maybe long overdue, I don't know, but that there's a family environment. And if our family environment, if the family of America is advocating violence, is advocating discrimination against certain people or sexes or sexual orientation or economic groups, and that's now acceptable, that's the family environment that more and more people are growing up in. And what I had shared was that as a psychotherapist, before 2016, the election in 2016 and the 2015 kind of run up to that election and all the campaigning that was going on, I never had one client in all the years of my practice that brought their concern about the politics in America to therapy. And during that election time and after, people came to therapy absolutely traumatized by what they saw going on in the United States, the violence that was erupting, the hate speech that was erupting, the collaboration with that was happening, where it became somehow now dominating in the news to talk about anti-Semitism and anti-Black and anti-woman and anti-everything and anti-immigrant, in ways that were keeping people up at night, just the way I had formerly seen, and of course still did see, people up at night over the traumas that they survived in their own childhoods. People being, a sister being the target of abuse by the dad or the mom, or being the target of abuse themselves, or being raped by an uncle and then nobody believing them, kind of like what you were talking about trying to really be a stand for the truth and get justice, and then being the target of further injustice for having spoken up. And these things are playing out on mass scales in America and all over the world today. And I'll just say this last thing and then please jump back in. None of us want this in our own lives. Nobody I know wants to be hated, discriminated against, withheld, resources from. Nobody I know wants to be raped or tortured or have their house bombed or have their families, wiped out in some campaign against a neighborhood or a race or a religion. Nobody I know, and I don't think there's a person in the world who wants these things inflicted on themselves or their loved ones. And yet, as communities and as nations and as races sometimes, or genders or whatever, we condone that to be done to other people. And I call this a mental health issue. And we're being fed that it's an ideological issue. And it's not. It's a mental health issue. And it's the mental health unwellness that has people become so divisive and so hateful and so wanting to act out on other people and take from them. And that's really the bottom line as I see it.
Definitely. Like, it's kind of related, but when somebody has a certain belief system and then all of a sudden it's black and white, the truth is there. But they never put, like, I've noticed that, especially in the last few years with the craziness that is going on, people will never put up their hand and kind of go, I was duped. My belief system was different. It's like the ego is totally getting in the way. And there's people attacking people in the household, not only their neighbors, but they're attacking in the household. And then eventually truth comes up, but nobody is putting their hand up. There's very few people have the integrity to kind of realize I was wrong because of I believed such and such a thing. Is that something that you've seen a lot?
100%. And what I would say, two things about that is we really are in a very right-wrong world culture. You're either right or you're wrong. And if I'm right, I have a right to make you wrong, rather than, and it's almost like you could beat people into becoming right, or you have a right to kill them because they're wrong. And this is an old paradigm that actually really needs to go for the human race, because the ways that we can dominate and kill each other in the name of right and wrong, have nuclear weapons behind them. They have the potential for a third world war behind them. Do we want that? Or do we want to stand up and say, this is wrong, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? So the big thing I want to say about that issue is, in the context of that we still live in a very right, wrong, good, evil cultural paradigm, which again, I believe really needs to go if we're going to survive here, honestly, is that we have made it kind of a circus. In other words, like when somebody gets exposed, it's all over the news. That congressman or that whatever had an affair with so-and-so. And then we're like at the Coliseum and we can't wait to vilify the next person. But the truth is we all make mistakes. We're all accountable for something, whether it's really small, I hurt your feelings by what I said, or I was, a bigot and I acted out on innocent people with my prejudice. Whatever it is, we have to make it something that we actually applaud in our culture, that people take account for what they've done, that we make it something that is, yeah, good for you. You apologized. You were responsible for the harm you did. And we're really far from that. What we do is we lock people up and we throw away the key. And so a couple things here. So Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa was a really good beginning for what you're talking about on a mass scale, on a governmental scale, on a community scale, which was that wasn't perfect. And the little that I've read about it, it wasn't perfect, but it went a long way to making it safe for perpetrators to own what they did and hear the consequence on the people that they hurt, to hear the pain that they inflicted in a safe setting. And that's a beginning of healing. Because one of the things that I have learned as a psychotherapist is that inside the perpetrator is a victim. And if that victim doesn't have a chance to be heard, safely heard, even if the way they coped with their victimization was horrific, There's still a victim in there. There's still an innocent child somewhere underneath everything they did. And if we really want to stop the cycle of abuse, we have to dedicate ourselves to that kind of healing. We do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now, this is kind of, I suppose, the $1 million question, because you mentioned the TV and stuff like that. Because if something happens, they put it out everywhere, and I mean, like CNN, BBC, all these, they regurgitate lies and everything, but they also show all the horrible things. And
Right.
when you have a family, like, because we know, I mean, there is abuse, like in the Scouts and things like that. We know that, and even in Disneyland and stuff like that. But it's a case now that what I've noticed is, I mean, like, I'm from in a 70s baby, and we went out and played, and we just kind of gallivanted and went around and everything. But now it's a case of, like, people are so afraid that they're not letting their child kind of go out. They have to be with them all the time. And even the stayovers, I mean, that's a mixed one anyway, depending on things. But, you take the risk of it. Like, but there's a lot of people, they won't allow that. And I get the protection because we know that there is abuse out there. But on the other side, what are we doing to that generation by protecting them all the time? And eventually they're out in the world on their own.
Well, I mean, I think this is what I think about what you're saying. I think it's a sad world that we live in, that little children are, little tiny children are being taught not to talk to strangers. And it's a sad world because it is a dangerous world, and because people naturally want to try to protect their families and their children. And I think they're doing the best they can by warning their children of what the dangers are and doing their best to protect them. But the answer is in looking at what's creating such a dangerous world. That's really the answer. So if you have somebody in a family, if you have a child, let's just say you have a teenager in a family that's hurting the younger kids. Okay, you can blame and shame and, throw that teenager out, or put them in a reform school, or send them to prison, or whatever you need to do to protect your kids. And you may need to do that. But in the bigger picture, we have to look at what happened to that teenager that they're hurting those children. Were they sexually abused, and they're acting out their sexual abuse on the younger kids? Was somebody hurting them at school that we didn't know about? Was a parent the one who was hurting them? What happened to that child that they're acting out in a way that's deleterious to other people? And on a societal level, we have to see, why do we have so many sexual perpetrators now? Why do we have school shootings that, like in the United States, there are so many mass shootings that there's more mass shootings than days in a year? That wasn't like that when I was a kid growing up. So what's happened to the mental health of the country? And I call it the family of America, because it's the largest family system that we all live in here in America, besides the global community. What's happened in the family of America that is perpetuating and making more extreme this kind of acting out? So we really have to look at what's happening in the family system that's generating this, instead of just blaming the most symptomatic people among us. Do we need to hold accountable the most symptomatic people among us? Yes, of course. We have to do something to try to protect ourselves. But if we really want to protect ourselves, we have to look at the origins. Just like when a person comes to therapy, where do they go in therapy? To their childhood. What was their upbringing like? What were their formative experiences? What happened to them that maybe created patterns in their life that were not functional or harmful or addictive or abusive? And so we need to do that with ourselves as larger communities. What's our formative experiences here that have led to, and what's happening now? And we could go into a lot about that. What's all playing out on social media? What's in the news? What's in the headlines? Do we talk about that there's another mass shooting? Yeah, we probably will. But could we talk about what happened to that person? What set them up from being an innocent infant to being a mass shooter? because something happened to them. And often it's many things happened to them that were extremely painful.
A lot of the time it's kind of breaking of the family unit. And also just because like from the 70s, even before that, it was like one person would work, the other would stay at home, mind the kids and everything. Now some people have 3 jobs and they don't have the energy or the time to be watching who the kids are. And I like, I'm the same as yourself. I was like, everyone, like a baby, we have unconditional love for the baby. And then it's just, they just go off in the right angle. And unfortunately, the person that's kind of minding them as well, that's when they kind of realize, hey, yeah, that's true. And they tend to, unfortunately, they go for the ones with, not from a strong family. They know the ones that are weak, so they know how to pounce, and unfortunately. So like, because this is something that I've seen with podcasters, with the group that I've been with, some of these people, they're taking on board all this information and it's getting them done. So they end up even getting away from it. Like they take it on board. Like I personally, I like to kind of make sure that I can switch off. I don't take it on board. I have to go down the rabbit hole. Sometimes I'll cry just on the story research because it's just so horrific. But I'm able to step away and I watch kind of comedies and stuff like that. But like for those that kind of take it too into heart, have you any kind of tips or advice for people that are, getting too depressed from it?
Yeah, and I see a lot of that in America. A lot of people, I think, are feeling like there's nothing I can do about this. I'm just going to try to take care of myself because this is out of control. And, if we don't make it, we just might not make it, which is a lot of resignation or a lot of feelings of powerlessness that are not helpful to us. I think we don't do well as adults feeling powerless, with really big things in our lives. So and this is the other part of the dedication of my book is what can we do? What do we need to learn about our own psychology that we could shift? So for the average person out there, you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to understand psychology. Although one of the points of my book is to really share what I've learned in the field of psychology and psychotherapy and make it common knowledge that there is a victim inside of a perpetrator, that we're living in a win-lose paradigm. And we need to live in a win-win paradigm. And what does that mean psychologically? What would we need to change psychologically to live in a win-win paradigm? Because if we continue in a win-lose paradigm, then we're always going to have losers who are symptomatic and who are going to act out their pain somewhere. But for the average person, what I would say is a couple of things. One of them is, if you are suffering yourself, get help. You do not deserve to suffer. If any help is available, to the extent that you heal your own wounds, you won't be reenacting them for the most part on yourself and other people. And to the extent that we heal our own wounds, we become safer for the world around us. And, jumping out to the family of America, I really believe that our resources, the bulk of our tax dollars, should go to helping families, increasing wages, providing better child care, better schools, better access to health care, taking the stress off parents so they're not bringing all their stress home or not even being able to come home, like you say, because they have 3 jobs. Because healthy families create healthy children, and healthy children become safe individuals when they grow up as adults. And that's really, for me, that's the bottom line, is the family unit. But what an individual can do, we can all be just a little bit kinder. We can all be a little bit more patient with the people around us. If someone's giving you a hard time in a store or a restaurant or on the street or in a parking lot, we don't have to just blow up. We can just be there for another person. Are you having a hard time? What's going on? Or, because really many people, and I will say this from my practice, we don't know what another person is bringing to the table. There are masses of people out there with unhealed trauma who are doing their best to hold on. And sometimes they're not doing very well at holding on. So if they're yelling at you in a parking lot, but really what's happening is they were sexually abused for 10 years as a child, and they're just trying to hold all that pain down on a daily basis. what could a smile, an act of kindness do? Or, you know, if you need to protect yourself because someone is aggressive toward you, protect yourself for sure. But know that there's a victim inside the perpetrator. Smile at people. You know, just to say hello, ask people how they're doing. We all need to feel like we belong somewhere. And there are many people in this world who actually don't believe that they belong anywhere because they never have. They didn't belong in their families. They didn't learn how to make friends. They don't know how to be socially appropriate. And they're angry and they're hurt. There was a beautiful story of someone I read, a woman who had decided to just go across America and ask people to tell their stories because so many people have no one who actually cares about their story, about their life. And they're prime for acting out or acting in or becoming addicts or doing something else dysfunctional to numb their pain, not because they're bad people. Anyway, long story short, she had decided, she was really afraid to do it, and she had decided that she would go into a diner, and the first person who made eye contact with her, she would sit down and tell them what she was doing and ask them if they would share their story. And she walked into a diner, and a man in the back was the first person who looked up at her, sitting alone at a table. And she went over to him and she told him that this was her mission. And he looked at her and he said, "No one has ever asked me. No one in my entire life. And there are a lot of dispossessed people out there who are really hurting, who just need our love and our attention and our acceptance. And it can be life-changing."
I think like we all, you know, we're all looking at all these little things, but there's all small little stuff. Like, for example, you know, people are barely able to pay the bills and stuff like that. And like, if you actually look at it, it's all orchestrated that it's so high to make people, we're slaves. We're all slaves if you look at it. I mean, it's orchestrated that we're all slaves, but all it means is everybody standing within themselves and just not tolerating it, or
Right.
when you see it. And I mean, what I've noticed with myself is, like, I can keep calm 99.9%. There's times you have to kind of show your power, but the person then just, they fizzle, and then they end up apologizing because their pain is coming out, and you know that it's just because of something simple. There's no way they could actually get that crazy. And it's like, if you have compassion, and the more people that can have compassion, the more it can actually happen. Like, so for example, the city, the way that they, you know, like, obviously they squeeze people and then they sell their house and throw them out on the street. Like, we should not tolerate that. And that saves so much damage internationally. I mean, I've seen that in the UK and Ireland and in the US. Like, we have to kind of not accept these things when we know they're wrong.
That's right. That's right. And it's an abusive system that punishes the people that stand up, or, you know, or discredits them, or slanders them, or kills them. It's an abusive system that silences truth tellers. And that's one of many of the big dynamics of an abusive system that I'm looking at the lens of America, or really any large institution that's abusive, through, because we need to know that. We can't keep saying these people are wrong and we have a right to kill them. We can't do that. Unless we want to be one of those people, because it could be us next. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize, is that power can turn on you in an instant.
And this is an important one, because it's like, I'll give an example. In the school, my son goes to it's copying the Finnish system, very good school system, that they can kind of decide if they want to do it. They don't give them homework and stuff like that. But I saw the 5G tower and the opposite building, but so close that it's dangerous. Like, and, you know, like, trying to get people together, because I've got all information, you know, military confirming how dangerous these things are. And all you need is a few people to come together, and they have to back off. People will complain about it, but as soon, I've tried this on a few different things, they all just run for the hills. As soon as you say, okay, let's do something about this, or let's all get 3 people together, let's start, you know, the clouds that they're spraying, the toxins and everything. I mean, I've seen patents on this. It's not, you know, yes, I'm attacked on all this, but it's 100%. So I wouldn't be throwing it out there and people would be complaining, they understand it. And I said, if we can get 3 each and we get to 100, that gets when you do live social media stuff, you get to the thousands. They have to pay attention then. They can't ignore you. But everybody, it's happened to me so many times, they run away. And I know because I've had lots of business, they constantly attack me. They try to do a criminal case against me. So I've learned, unfortunately, I have to keep my head and just kind of give the information. I can't be standing in the front of the crowd because people aren't behind you. And that's all it takes. But I'm just curious, like, what's the psychology going on in people that they know something is wrong, but they just kind of, they just turn around and walk away?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons psychologically. One of them is that we've talked a little bit about, and one of them is they've either identified with the aggressor and that they're going to stay there. They're going to, no matter whether they even know if it's right or wrong, or they're frightened of the aggressor and they're so afraid to go against the aggressor because they feel like they'll be the next one attacked, which they could be. They could be. There are many people in the United States who have, done peace marches and marches for women and marches for Black Lives Matter and marches for the for the 99% who have been attacked, with rubber bullets, with tear gas, and injured and jailed for exercising what is supposed to be our right to a peaceful demonstration here in America. And so there's a lot of fear of standing up to an abusive authority, just like the same fear exists in a child in an abusive home. What happens to a child who stands up to an abuser? Usually they get abused worse. So they've learned to comply. And I've seen this too in families, and we definitely see this here in America, and you probably see this around the world, is that people are rewarded for being complicit with the abuser. They get more money, they get more power, they get more influence, they get a better job, they get a share in a company or whatever they get. And so there's a payoff for turning the other way. There's a payoff for actually attacking someone who will speak truth to the power that they are. So and these are all psychological dynamics. These are exactly the dynamics. I've seen all of them play out in individual families that were dysfunctional and abusive, where, one child was rewarded for actually being complicit in the abuse of another child. I mean, that's abuse. And how does that child grow up? How do they grow up? Who do they become in the world? What can we expect if we don't actually look at this through a psychological lens and keep speaking up? I mean, when I first became a therapist, first of all, I'm an introvert. You wouldn't know it, but I'm an introvert by nature. Did I ever think I would be talking on podcasts or writing a book that spoke to my country? No, it was the last thing I ever wanted. But I felt compelled to do that because for exactly the same reason that you're talking about. If you see it, you have to say something. Or, we want to say something, and I want to say something. And I want to say so much about what I think we need to shift in order to break this cycle of abuse. And we know what some of those things are in a family. Is it easy to break the cycle of abuse in an individual family? Is it easy to heal someone who has become a perpetrator? No, it is not. It is difficult work, and it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of dedication and a lot of courage. But it can be done. If you know anything in your own life, I feel like I've healed from some of what hurt me as a child because I had access to help, because I lived and still do in a relatively safe environment where I'm not fighting for my life every day. I'm not on survival. So the basic element of how do we reverse this, and this goes back to your other question, is we have to become responsible for ourselves. Who am I being in this interaction with you? Who am I being as a voter? Am I profiting from, injustice done to other people? Do I pay the person who works for me a living wage? What would it mean if I got a little less of the share? Can I vote for more funding for our school system or for teachers? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, the bottom line is the more I become responsible for myself, heal my own wounds, and bring my healing out into the world in whatever form it is for me. I became a psychotherapist. You're a podcaster. I don't know what else you do, but you spread a message of healing and hope and addressing injustice, but in a way that is designed to bring healing, we're not here to hate the haters. That's just more of the same. What actually would break this cycle? So can we use the best that psychology has to offer and apply it to larger systems? And what would it cost us to do that? And what would be the benefit? Because everything that it would cost us, and it would cost us a lot, in terms of, some people wouldn't have as much power, or they wouldn't have as much wealth, or they wouldn't have as much control. And we could create a safer society for everyone and for our children and for future generations, which means, and, I'm on a soapbox, I'll say the last thing, which means that we wouldn't be doing to the environment what we're doing. We wouldn't be abusing our environment the way we're abusing, our human environment either.
And like the way, just finally, the way this like society is kind of organized, so it's keeping a massive percentage of each country that they're barely able to survive. But lots of them need therapy, but they can't afford it. The government doesn't provide it, or else they say, hey, wait 2 years, which is unfortunately in some situations isn't too long. For those that find themselves in that situation, they can't afford to get a therapist that is not provided by the state. What's their best kind of port of call?
Yeah, I mean, I think sure, because it's really true in America too. There's probably millions of people who can't afford to get the help that they really deserve, and they're still living in the conditions that are making them symptomatic. So I think we have to educate each other for one thing. But for the individual that you're talking about, find one safe person to talk to. And if there's really no safe person to talk to, then do something for yourself that, and I find this very healing. It doesn't necessarily heal the deepest wounds that we have, because I think we really do need to heal the wounds that we have with other people. If you've been hurt by people, the best healing is with safe people who can provide a different human environment for you. People who see you, who love you, who care about you, who support you, who value you, who include you. But short of that, what I have found is any creative pursuit, if it's art, if it's writing, if it's taking care of pets, if it's gardening, if it's just having one plant in your window that you water and love, we have to find a place to put our love to feel healthy. We were born loving, connected human beings. And for many people, and I've worked with many people who never heard that they were loved and have never felt loved. We have to find a place to put our love, even if we're not receiving it. You can receive love from a plant or a puppy, and again, it's not a good substitute for a human being. But if you really don't have that, give that to yourself. And the other big place that I see people find solace and peace and some healing is in nature. Just being in nature, being with the trees, being by the ocean, being by water, sitting in the grass, feeling the sunshine. Just let yourself take something loving and nurturing in. It might be feeding yourself good food, but doing it with the mindset of I'm going to give myself as much as I can what I haven't gotten. And I'm going to find somewhere that I may be able to give that to others. It may be volunteering to help other people or children, or donating, or, working in a food bank. We need a place for our love to have expression somewhere, because that is actually healing in whatever venue you can find, and not to minimize the value of that. If you're helping one person, if you're just smiling at one person, you've made a contribution. It doesn't not count. It all counts.
Yep. That's fantastic advice, and thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You might let people know where they can find you.
Thank you so much. I also really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You've been like a wonderful person to talk with. I loved your questions. I loved your responses, your insights, and your take on things. You can find me best on my website, which is www.phyllisleavitt.com. And I'll spell it because you can spell my name so many different ways. It's PHYLLISLEAVITT.com. And you can contact me on my website. I'm happy to respond to anybody's questions or responses or inquiries or anything you'd like. I have if you contact me or sign in for my newsletter, I have now a free PDF that you will receive, which is called The 6 Secrets of Healing Relationship After Conflict. And we didn't get a chance to talk about those, but you're welcome to get that PDF. And there's also a chapter in my book that has specific skills for healing conflict and coming back together, because that's what we're not seeing on a broad scale, is people are invested in divisiveness rather than in what would it take for us to join together and work for the common good, which is, of course, what we want for parents in a family, right? So in a family of America or a family of Poland or a family of England or a family of anywhere, that's what people need. And that's what I'm committed to. So, and I'm on, Instagram and Facebook, and I have a lot of posts and articles on LinkedIn, and those are the best places to find me. Thank you for asking. And if I can say the title of my book one more time, it's America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. So it really applies to anybody anywhere in the world. But I wrote for America because I live here.
Yeah, but exactly. I think everything is replicated around. So, yeah, I make sure I put all the links to your social media. And I mean, what I'll do is I put the graphic as well of the book that people will see on one of the posts as well. So that they will.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you so much.
So that's all for the Speaking and Awakening podcast. And because of what we talked about today, I think this affects every single person. So you might share with people. And also what's very important is with the algorithms, just give a thumbs up, give a comment. Even if you didn't like it, if there was something we said you didn't agree with, that's okay as well. And just that helps more people see. So until next week, take care.
So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you can find my 6 podcasts on roycullen.com or scan the QR code if you're looking to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, help with that. Also, if you're looking for a virtual assistant, we also have that service. And you can help the show by visiting the store, supporting our sponsors, or making a donation. Until next week, take care.